There's a lot of networking going on, fear not. I shall shut all of the doors at the back when I get there so that we'll be able to listen to this fine panel talk. And you are very lucky that you're in here to catch the very beginning of it. So without further ado, I shall get out the way. I'll go out there and shut all the doors so that we can hear what the guys are saying. And I'm going to hand over to John here, who's going to introduce the panel, and they are going to blow your mind, I'm sure. No pressure, folks. No pressure.
So thank you. Is this on? Hello? Can you hear me? Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you for that introduction. Let's just introduce the topic real quick. It's Let's Be Pragmatic, the Barriers to Metaverse Adoption. This can cover so many different realms of what we discussed over the last day and a half, whether it be technical limitations, whether it be application of AI, machine learning, cultural adoption, social adoption, many, many different areas that this crosses into, and we have a fantastic panel to discuss it with. So should we just go down the panel and introduce each other and what it is we do in this space?
I'll kick off.
Sure.
So my name is Marcus. I'm a tech partner at Wigan, a law firm in the UK. Also head of the blockchain group. Our clients represent a broad cross-section of metaverse participants, all the way from sort of telcos and connectivity providers and infrastructure, all the way through to blockchain developers, code auditors, gaming experience providers, and also sort of major global platforms, IP rights holders, and those that want to sort of use the metaverse to try to engage with their communities. And then, so I was on the panel yesterday for the UK sort of regulatory focus, so hopefully I can help out with the discussion today from a legal and regulatory perspective on potential ways to increase adoption for the metaverse.
Hi everyone, I'm Carl. I work for Horizon Blockchain Games, leading business development and partnerships. We've been building in the Web3 space for quite a long time. We initially built out a free-to-play online trading card game called Skyweaver. And through building Skyweaver, we obviously we wanted to target traditional gamers and your kind of non-crypto native users. So that led us to build out a suite of tools, mainly called Sequence, which comprises of a wallet that looks at solving that in full user onboarding process for users. And we've also developed a Web3 stack that helps developers to easily build Web3 applications. So just looking at how do we onboard both users and developers and make life really nice and easy for them when venturing into Web3. Alex?
Hey. Hi, I'm Alexandra Snow, the founder and CEO of Immersion. We are what I would call a metaverse publisher. Essentially, we've got a software that we license as a service where you can deploy Unity WebGL content and connect it with multimedia content and text. So kind of a websites of the future, which can be one page big or metaverse big. Background, I've been in the telecommunication industry most of my life, so very in tune with everything related to infrastructure and connectivity. I've been working for Sony Ericsson for many, many years, so did all of the mobile revolution and trade VR for the first time in 2014, and that's what got me into the metaverse. I realized that this was the future of, in my opinion, of telecommunications. Outside of that, I'm also today wearing the hat of the Metaverse Standard Forum, for whom I'm a speaker. It's a very new initiative. It's got 2,000 members trying to connect many big, smaller, and medium companies around standards. There are a number of work streams for the Metaverse Standard Forum. Actually, I'll speak about it later. I'm sure I'll have the opportunity. So there is that hat. And I'm also the woman in immersive tech lead for the UK. It's a community of 3,000 members in Europe. So very focused on women in XR in Europe. And that's it for me.
I'm Ben Gertzel. I'm the CEO of SingularityNet, which is a blockchain-based platform for AI. My primary career has been AI. Since that time, I've seen VR and metaverses in a lot of enthusiasm and then less enthusiasm in various waves and cycles. And I'm hopeful that this surge of enthusiasm for these technologies is going to be the one that finally brings them broad success. And I'm very interested in metaverses as a place to teach AIs and as a place to utilize AI technology in various regards.
Fantastic. And I think in all of your answers, you used the word metaverse or referred to metaverses in some way. And we've been here for a day and a half, and we've had or heard many different definitions and interpretations of what the metaverse is. So could everybody just give what they see as the metaverse?
I think legal should go last on this one.
I'll start. I'll see it as, I love the definition of embodied internet, but essentially the web in 3D. That's what it is for me.
A little bit of a different definition of metaverse. So I kind of look at the metaverse in terms of there is only one open metaverse, and it really looks at how do we start interacting a bit differently with the digital world. So if you look at how we interact with everything digital at the moment, it's usually through a phone screen that's plastered in front of our faces for far too long every day, or through a laptop screen or something like that. And the metaverse really becomes on how the digital and real world really start blending. And I think in future, that's really where AR becomes really super exciting. And we have a lot of things that are digital, but then also immersed into our real world. And obviously, to get to that point, VR plays a very important role as well, because VR then becomes a little bit more immersive of how we experience digital worlds and things like that. So yeah, I think that's my view of the metaverse at the moment.
For me, I think the metaverse is a culmination of a collection of technologies into one use case that's meant to replicate real life in a digital format. So it's all-encompassing and a rich experience. But legally, and also technically, it comes down to lines of code on a server somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, the internet or the web in 3D and is not a terrible way to look at it. I think of the metaverse as a sort of open, configurable, extensible 3D environment that people can go around and do all sorts of things in, and that people can build all sorts of things in. And like Fortnite is awesome, but it's not a metaverse really. I mean, it's an amazing 3D environment, but it lacks sort of the free-for-all open extensibility that we have in the internet, just as like AOL in the old days sort of lacked the openness that the broader internet later showed was so valuable.
It's interesting to have four very different answers, but four that all have the same similarities in there or thereabouts. Of course, you discussed the Metaverse Standards Forum, and of course we have the Open Metaverse Alliance for Web3 as well. How feasible do you think is the necessary cooperation to create this open metaverse that you touched on, Carl?
I think it's really important, because one of the core things around the metaverse is interoperability. So we talk about there being one open metaverse. If you're building an experience, a virtual world or something like that, and your experience or virtual world's not actually interoperable with anything else, I wouldn't actually say you're part of the open metaverse, because then a user can't actually take their items or their identity from that world or that experience to somewhere else. So in that essence of interoperability, standards become very important. Everyone's worked with an Excel data file before, and if you've ever tried to take data from one Excel file into another one, you know that it's an absolute pain in the ass unless all your columns and rows are exactly the same. So from a standards perspective, that's just why standards are so important. I think that's also why we focus on the EVM ecosystem, because that's really going to be the technical foundation to interoperability and the shared token standards that kind of power that.
Maybe just a couple of legal points on that. So interoperability, of course, a huge barrier to adoption for metaverse or metaverses. Everyone should be paying attention to T's and C's. T's and C's will regulate what you can and can't do in relation to a metaverse, what you can and can't do in relation to a particular experience within a metaverse, and whether or not you can transfer things in between metaverses. So that's going to be hugely important. An example of that, a current example would be Apple has updated their iOS App Store terms to then specifically regard what NFTs can and can't be done or used in relation to an app. So for example, Apple's concern would be to ensure that whatever's happening within their ecosystem ensures that they have the ability to then charge the particular commission on any sort of in-app purchases. So on that basis, they do not permit NFTs that give off-platform rights to holders or interactions that occur outside of the perimeter of that particular ecosystem. So it's things like this that are going to have a network effect on different metaverses. And it'll come down to what the commercial drivers are going to be for with each individual metaverse. What's the way around it? Cooperation.
From a Metaverse Standard Forum and immersion perspective, there are 5 work streams now in the Metaverse Standard Forum. So that was quite interesting to see since the formation in June, to see what the community was interested to talk about and work on. Interoperability, number 1. That's the one that actually I enrolled for, most interesting. But top 2 is ethics, security, and identity comes there. Talking about interoperability, I was catching up with some of the talks of the MSF yesterday, and I realized that we're often talking about transferring 3D assets from one metaverse to the next and to the digital marketplace and blah, blah. But actually, the problem starts way earlier. So right now, there was a presentation from this guy from Pixar about USD, which is considered to be one of the up-and-coming standards that we could use. And I realized as he was talking that to create a story, an animated story in Pixar, they had the same pain as I'm experiencing with my team, where we are scaling hundreds of scenes to deploy in the metaverse, 3D scenes, is kind of this creative workflow that takes you through a pipeline, and taking the whole journey of that pipeline and being able to update that pipeline. The dream would be in real time at any point of the pipeline, and then bam, you redeploy again. And that would be allowing to have tools that are truly interoperable if we had that, because it's the equivalent of thinking, how do you do to create a video today and push it on YouTube? It's all working, right? It's super easy. That doesn't exist for the metaverse yet. It's a highly qualified, complicated process, which we are all trying to improve, etc. But we need a standard to actually create and produce.
Okay. Currently, from a technical point of view, when it comes to games or metaverses, sharded experiences where there's many kind of duplicates of the same area, but with a limit of 100 people in each, is the most common way to deal with a large amount of people. I think when we think about the future of an ideal metaverse, we think of having, 4,000 people in one area, 5,000 people or more. How far away do you think we are from a technical point of view from that becoming a reality? And with advances in hardware, AI, connectivity, infrastructure, how much do you think that would all cost?
I would also like to comment that most of my day in the real world is not spent in a room with 4,000 other people. And I mean, it's fun to do a performance on stage for thousands of people, but on the other hand, for intense interactions, it's pretty hard to interact with that many people all at once anyway. So I do think that technical problem is solvable, and there's interesting technical discussion there. I would push back on the notion that that's like the major barrier to adoption of the metaverse, just getting a huge amount of people in one space. There's loads of rewarding things to do with fewer people in this space, just as we have in this space right here.
Yeah, I think I'd supplement that, Ben, is that, I think when we look at scalability issues and things like that, sometimes people have the assumption that if they're building something in Web3, the entire thing has to be on a blockchain or on-chain. And I think that's not always the case, is that you can have components of your experience, components or elements that are off-chain, but the ownership mechanics and really your digital ledger in terms of transferability and interoperability, that aspect is all on-chain. So I think when we start getting into the scalability, you think about games such as Roblox, Epic, or Fortnite, World of Warcraft, they all have a couple of 100,000 users playing in those experiences at the same time. That can still continue to progress, and the Web3 element does not all have to encompass that.
Yeah, this is another point which is interesting. So without going too far in a blockchain plumbing tangent, but we're working on a project called Hypercycle, which is a ledgerless blockchain, initially to be rolled out as a Cardano sidechain. But the purpose there, by getting rid of the ledger and sort of sharding all the way down to the individual node. I mean, the goal there is to allow more and more and more interactions to go on chain. So I do think you'll be able to put highly granular interactions on chain with Hypercycle and other next generation technologies. I just don't think that's really needed to make compelling experiences. There are many kinds of compelling experiences to be made.
Yeah, I mean, you think about all these players in games or experiences, and they're jumping around and jumping on trees. You don't really need a ledger to kind of to record that kind of data. It's not really relevant, right?
If it's not on the ledger, it didn't really happen. If a tree falls in the forest and it's not on chain, did it really happen?
I think it depends what you do with the data. If you're going to sell that data, I guess it could be very good to have it on the blockchain because it kind of secures its accuracy.
And just a legal point there. So obviously what is and what is not on-chain also has legal implications. So for example, from a data protection GDPR perspective, if you have personal data which is somehow captured on-chain, you create all sorts of complications there because there's a lot of conflicting obligations when it comes to personal data. And if it is on-chain, it does create issues with complying with the articles of GDPR. So for example, with the right to be forgotten, the obligation to allow data to be edited, these things are not really compatible with on-chain capture of that type of data. There's other ways to do it, obviously, but if you do it on-chain, it is an issue.
So if I've given my permission on-chain to get my first name and last name,
it's a right that you can't contract out of. So it's this. So one issue is if that type of data is captured on-chain, that's an issue for the provider of the solution. The other is there's a lot of incompatible concepts when it comes to, for example, under GDPR, there is someone who's the controller of the information, or who is the controller in a decentralized platform. Sometimes it's hard to identify. So there are certain concepts which are not compatible if you're trying to.
There can also be a requirement that you can ask to have the data deleted if you want, and if it's on an immutable blockchain, then how do you ask to have it deleted? So
so if a blockchain says to a user, you will contract out of forever your right to request the data to be amended, that won't be enforceable.
How do you see this in terms of ZK-based chains, zero knowledge proofs and things like that?
So those are where the actual personal data is not captured on chain, right? They've got a way to verify the data that is off chain, but the way that they've done it is to ensure that what is on chain is not actually considered personal data and therefore doesn't attract the GDPR obligations.
Okay, well, just kind of continuing a little bit on kind of touching on the data point a little bit. Several metaverse environments, and of course MMO spaces, have to deal with issues like, you know, player harassment, unwanted encounters between players, all of that kind of thing. How do we moderate activity in virtual worlds, especially with everything being recorded on chain? And will that be dealt with any differently to how we moderate activity in MMOs and other multiplayer experiences?
So I'd like to hear Ben's view on this, just from an AI perspective, to be honest.
Oh, well, I mean, I think that the analog with social networks is pertinent here. And if you have a company that owns a certain space, that company has obvious legal obligations regarding what happens in that space. If you have a decentralized network where different rooms or lobes or planets or whatever are owned and controlled by different people, I mean, then whoever owns that little space or whatever group of people set it up has the responsibility regarding what happens there. And I think that will naturally lead to a more permissive metaverse in the sense that it'll be more like the internet. Like there are corners for whatever weird thing you want that's not totally illegal, and there may be a dark metaverse too ultimately, right? So, but yet the average person may stick within a few segments of it that are more carefully curated by a smaller number of organizations, right? And I think AI can certainly play a role here, but I mean, what is the AI's mandate becomes a very important question, right? I mean, if you have a centralized organization running a big block of the metaverse, I mean, they may give a very restrictive mandate to the AI, and if you have a metaverse which is more decentralized, which I think is what many of us here are after, it could be more like each of you has your own AI helper, and that AI helper knows what you want to deal with and what you don't want to deal with, and it will warn you, like, don't go over there, don't go over there, and it will filter out things that you don't want to hear, and it can be more on a personal basis rather than like an overall crude mandate, like no Donald Trump supporters in this space or something.
I think you could just, there was this episode from Black Mirror about social media where you can just block people, right? And then ultimately there is the justice as well at some point that blocks users who were bad, and then they became alone in the world. But I think you always have the opportunity to walk away as well, right, from a discussion. So I think individuals can make their own decisions too. That takes me to kids, because I've got two. And maybe with kids it's a bit harder, you know, they don't necessarily know when to walk away, when it becomes quite aggressive, and they kind of almost want to do the opposite, you know, they want to win, they want to go against the other person, and so yeah, maybe there is an age moderation that's pretty much important to consider.
I think a comment from me, so obviously there's all the technical controls that can be in place about that, but I think a lot of the metaverse experiences that we talked about are not appropriate for children, and so so if you look at the analogies in the current industries, for example, betting and gaming does this quite well in terms of age restrictions. You can't access certain things unless you verify age, that sort of thing. Parental controls. Gaming also does as well. So I think a lot of those concepts that you see at the moment for Web 2 will be the same for Web 3. So for metaverse experiences, many of those rules will not change. A crime is still a crime. Negligence is still negligence. Online harms to children is still going to be online harm to children in Web 3. There'll be other issues as well, of course. There's jurisdictional points, for instance, you know, who is it that's going to be responsible for a certain obligation? That comes as a sort of a broader regulatory issue of, well, if we're going to be regulating this space, then who is the party that's held responsible for ensuring these standards, or who's going to be the one responsible for enforcing the rules to ensure that particular activities, outcomes, interactions do not occur in relation to particular vulnerable groups of society?
A very interesting answer there. And of course, the metaverse is closely tied to the rise of Web3 and to the concept of the ownership, or true ownership rather, of digital goods. How do we build the right foundations today to make the metaverse a success tomorrow? And what are the ingredients for a successful and popular metaverse?
Yeah, I think the technology is there now to make a metaverse that works well enough for people to have fun in and to want to use it, and that, you know, I was an early user of Second Life. Then the technology was kind of crap, right? And I mean, just in order to make a virtual world where users could build stuff, you just had to make things very, very slow and ugly, right? And that's not the case now. Like the technology is good. I think what we need are compelling experiences, and I mean, right now the best sort of centralized video games are just way more fun than most metaverses are to do things in. And I think in a way the NFT craze brought the metaverse space down a bad path, and there was the idea that all you need to do to make a metaverse is like let people make NFTs or buy and sell NFTs, and they'll all join the metaverse to get rich, right? Which never seemed like it would be sustainable to me. There are a few people who will do that, but most players don't want to go. And the idea that earning tokens will be the main thing that makes you want to use the metaverse also is quite stupid. I mean, most people don't want to go there and just like click, even to have their avatar click on thing over and over, like, yay, I earned 5 cents for clicking on this button. I mean, it's not fun, right? So I mean, the experience needs to be made compelling, and if this means a more open, less organized experience focused on social interaction and creating stuff has to be made compelling. I mean, that's the interesting challenge, right? And it breaks down to many challenges. It breaks down to like, how do you make educational metaverses compelling for kids? Could you make a metaverse for elderly people who are trapped in a senior living facility and can't get up and move around anyway? Maybe they want to get up and move around in the metaverse. Can you make building content for your friends to experience a fun and compelling game, even if you're not going to get rich from NFTizing the content that you made? So I think that's really where the creativity is needed now, is on compelling user experience that fits the open vibe of a metaverse, rather than just building a conventional video game and saying, well, this is a video game, but it's inside the metaverse.
I'll side with Ben on this. Like, I think a lot of our clients, they are looking to launch a metaverse or an immersive experience, and they think you just throw a world in 3D out there, like a 3D conference, multiplayer, and that's it. And there is nothing more boring than that. Once you've launched it, after 5 minutes, you've been there, that's it. And I'm generous with 5 minutes.
That's because it takes 5 minutes to get it going.
I was going to touch on that as well. So content is the same as the 2D internet. It's like a website. You launch it, it doesn't stay static forever, and that's it. That's your web page. You have to keep pushing content, blog stories, testimonials, videos, images, infographics, blah blah blah. You need to do the same with your immersive experience, and brands and brand directors don't yet completely get that, although that's strange, right, that they are from marketing, so you must understand the context of storytelling, but you just have to, you do that one time and you have to keep investing, and it's not a one-off investment.
Just putting it in the metaverse doesn't actually make it interesting intrinsically, right? I mean, it gives you different avenues for making it interesting, some using AI, which I'll talk about in my talk later, right? But it doesn't make it fun for people. Like the thrill wears off fast. Like, hey, I'm in this 3D space. There are 3D objects. There's no one else here. Goodbye.
Exactly. Then I was going to touch on loading time and latency is my horse battles. You know, I'm really fighting that, especially because we are a web-first capability. So we've gone from scenes that were 2 megabytes to now 100 megabytes. Takes a bit longer to load, but it's worth a while. So we've gone that mile. Now we are going to 1 gig next year, so going pixel streaming, because we believe that the graphic fidelity is very important for our customers. Our customers want it. Of course, we're dreaming of it too, so we have to keep pushing, right? But indeed, it takes time to load. It takes time to interact, so it's not seamless yet. And I think when it becomes seamless, of course, it will help a lot the industry.
Alex, when you talk about that latency issue, is that when you're targeting specific geographical regions? Because obviously there's such a difference in internet speeds across the different regions. So how do you cater for that?
I don't yet have a lot of that problem, but we are doing the R&D for deploying our multiplayer capability. So today we are not multiplayer yet. We are touching on the topic of region. We have a lot of Saudi clients, so we are like, okay, where are we going to put the servers? Which Amazon servers are we going to focus on? Egypt, Dubai, I don't remember exactly which one we had. So yeah, it's definitely a topic, and I don't have all the solutions yet, because I'm like, guys, it has to be global. It's internet, it's the web. So I can't just say the Saudi clients are going to have a great experience, and then the rest of the world is going to have to wait really long. It doesn't work, right? So I don't have the answer. If you have it, please let me know.
So I don't yet. But yeah, also fully agree with what you both have said around more focusing on creating those compelling experiences for users. And I think also when it comes down to doing tokenized experiences, having NFTs, SFTs in games and these kind of environments, it's very important to think about the longevity of that and the utility over time for that, because obviously, Ben, as you referred to, these things are all immutable, so they're going to be there for quite a long time, and so the users are going to expect some kind of utility and experience over a long period of time. So I think that also comes down to just how we communicate this to users. I think using terminology like NFT and SFT, that describes back-end technology. It's not really relevant to users. I think one of the successes with what Reddit's done and what Starbucks is doing as well, they're not even using the NFT word or anything like that, which for me, if you're doing user communications, I'd say NFT is probably a swear word, don't use it. Rather use something like digital collectibles, or be a little bit more creative like Starbucks and call them journey stamps, whatever the hell they're going to do. But it's a token at the end of the day, but it makes it a bit more relatable to your end user.
And just for me, so on a connectivity piece, I mean, at my house, I get 60 megs down and 10 megs up on a good day. But they're saying that for the full metaverse experience, 1 gig down and up is an absolute minimum, and the future looking at 5, 6, 7 gigs up and down. And so on the infrastructure connectivity piece, there's a huge issue to overcome, a huge investment required from industry to bridge that digital divide against those that do have super fast broadband versus those that don't.
And there are those of us with a satellite dish on our roof who are totally cut off from the metaverse.
Well,
out in the middle of the
new
woods.
low Earth orbit system's actually quite good. But then from a reg perspective, I think about in terms of decentralization. And so regulations these days at the moment are currently based on a centralized system. So as more and more components of our solution, our metaverse experience are decentralized, they're going to require a decentralized approach to regulation as well. And so, for example, a thing of that is, instead of looking at who is responsible for enforcing something, you've got to think of what are the rules that everyone agrees to? How do we audit and regulate the rules that we all sign up to? That's going to be an example of a decentralized approach to regulation rather than a centralized one.
Do you think regulators are open to actually looking at that kind of an approach, just given the fact that governments generally like control?
Yes and no. So plenty of consultations right now, plenty of ideas, plenty of sort of position papers at the moment from different regulators around the world. But on the whole, no. It's uncomfortable for regulators. Yeah.
No, there's a lot that has to happen for the metaverse to really work, and the regulations need to fall into place, and interoperability needs to work, technology needs to work. But I think still the advent of a more user-centric mentality is going to be the key. I mean, as long as there's like just hundreds of people in major metaverses and zeros of people in minor ones, I mean, then all these other issues are not that important, right? So I mean, I think finding ways to make the metaverse experience incredibly compelling and exciting to people will open up all these other challenges in a much more real way, certainly. But
by the way, it makes me think that I personally think the most fun part is to make the metaverse than to experience it.
Well, yeah.
To make worlds, right?
This is one thing that we've been playing with is, can you use AI so you describe something and then it appears, right? Just like you can do in Mid-Journey or something with images, there's a bunch of technologies to be able to do that with 3D content. So if users can just...
never-ending world.
Yeah, right. Users can create worlds by verbally describing or making a sketch. That's quite interesting capability, which is just on the fringes of being there now. Now, how to work that into social gameplay is an interesting challenge, which I'm sure will be met by the next generation of game designers.
It's an incredible conversation. We've touched on technical challenges, community challenges, social challenges. Of course, one aspect of the metaverse that has seen increased credence in the last 12 months is brand adoption. What are the biggest concerns and the opportunities facing brands looking to enter this space, and what would your response be to those concerns? But also, for brands that don't want to enter yet, why should they continue to pay attention to how this space develops?
I think brands, number one, they need audience, right? That's what they're looking for. So if you have an empty metaverse, it's not very interesting for them. So I think right now Roblox would be one of the experiences that is most popular because it's open and then you can create an experience and there is a lot of users. But even then, with my team, we were looking at the figures and you know, you would have to compare it with Instagram and all the other opportunity in terms of channels. However, of course, there is the visual and unique type of experience, spatial, 3D, that this can deliver. So it's an additional type of experience. I think it's still worth it if you have an audience, anywhere it is, on your own website, on Instagram, on Roblox, wherever that audience is, you can deploy your own immersive experience and help elevate your audience experience through this novel media. So that would be my recommendation. Just play with it because it's fun. It's cool for the audience. It's fun.
So Alex, when talking to your clients, do you also term it as a bit more of a focused activation for your clients? Because I suppose if you think about it and you compare it to something like an Instagram or Facebook, something like that, those kind of ads is more like throwing mud on the wall and seeing what will stick because you're targeting a very large amount of people. But if we use like Starbucks, for example, and what they're effectively doing, you have a bit more of a more direct means of targeting individuals and users, because on a blockchain, you can very easily see who are the users that are holding your tokens or NFTs or digital collectibles, and then you can target those individuals very much more directly.
Yes, it's an activation, clearly, and I'm working on it not being just an activation, right? Because otherwise it's very short span, but today that's what it is. You're launching a 3D immersive experience for a 2 months, 3 months campaign, and then if you don't renew that and make a new experience, it's gone. It's content. Thinking about data, we can track not so much the users' information, but what they do, their behavior, like on a website. So it's very interesting, I think, for a brand to understand what people are interested in terms of immersive content, what they like to interact with, what type of media, what type of world. Within a world, what kind of worlds, like a classroom or a classroom at the beach or classroom at the mountain, what do people prefer? So you can track that. That's very interesting and compelling data, I think. It's
like website cookies on steroids.
Yeah, it's not so much about the user's, well, it is the user's brain, but it's much more inside of their brain.
And I think that data aspect becomes quite interesting because, as you mentioned, cookies are not going to be around forever. I think that's kind of, they're on a short lifespan at the moment. So how we start looking at replacing cookie-related data is quite interesting because Web3 and blockchain enables the user to become the owner of their data. And right now, when you look at these major corporations that are kind of, well, making money off of all of our information, and we're not getting too much back from that, blockchain actually enables us to have more control over our personal data and even either monetize it directly ourselves or get a bit more focused experiences. And I think that's quite interesting. And the other aspect is also from a brand perspective. I know we've spoken about interoperability quite a bit, but there's also interoperability of, you know, if you look at loyalty rewards and loyalty programs and things like that, at the moment, they're all very closed. But what interoperability actually enables is you can then start being interoperable with other loyalty programs and supplement your users' experiences in that regard.
I just wish I could sell an NFT of the time I got to 1 million in Atari Pac-Man in 1980. You know, that wasn't on the blockchain. It's gone. That would be beautiful for Atari's brand. It was a great milestone in my life, and it's vanished. Right. So there's certainly a lot of potential here.
Absolutely. So, Marcus, I'll probably direct this question towards you. I mean, in my panel yesterday, I touched on the FTX collapse and what that means for regulation in the space. Also, yesterday, we saw BlockFi enter Chapter 11 in New Jersey as well. How will regulation affect the metaverse, and will regulation make it more attractive to potential partners, potential brands, etc.?
Okay, maybe I might, show of hands, who wants more regulation for the metaverse? Who wants more? Okay, very few. Okay, some. Okay, another question. Who wants regulatory certainty for the metaverse? Yeah, okay. So definitely more, right? So this is the thing. I mean, typically the law lags behind the economy. It just always happens. And so particularly for the metaverse, Web3, blockchain developments, things move so quickly that that lag is even more obvious than normal. And so stuff happens and billions of dollars of tokens are lost already before the regulator goes, oh, let's have a consultation paper. So, so it's particularly acute with Web3, metaverse, blockchain solutions because of just the speed. But I think everyone is screaming out for more certainty. But it does take time because everything has to be well considered. There's a long legislative process when it comes to making new laws, providing guidance. The other challenge as well, though, is that the laws, again, as I sort of mentioned earlier, they also are predicated on a centralized system. It assumes a few things. It assumes that there is someone responsible for a particular ecosystem or for enforcing rules or for, you know, if there's a loss incurred, then there's a party that's going to make you good, right? Whereas a lot of the things that we talk about here, those concepts don't quite fit. So for example, if you're a software developer for a protocol, arguably, should that developer owe a duty of care to a user that incurs loss? If you have your computer hacked and your private keys stolen and someone takes away your crypto, the exchange is going to go, well, it's not my problem, right? If there was an exploit that someone has found in the code, right, then one question is, well, who's liable? Who should make you whole? If the code is screwed up, then should they be found liable in negligence for failing to do what they should have done to fix the code? Should they have a right to actually plug gaps? If you say, hey, here's an issue, fix it next week, should they do that? But the answers to these questions are at odds with also what decentralization means, because it affects the integrity of the code if you can actually change it later on. So there's inherent tensions between sort of regulatory and sort of policy outcomes as well as what decentralized solutions are trying to achieve. And so one means would be a different regulatory approach, would be to be, for example, to regulate the rules that apply, that everyone agrees to, as opposed to having one person who's going to be responsible for enforcing against other people. So regulatory certainty, I think, is what we all want.
I think it's when you bring up FTX, it's just really, really important to note that FTX was not a failure of blockchain or Web3 in any way, shape, or form. That was a failure of regulatory clarity and custodial approaches. So FTX as a business, it's an exchange. They've got access to users' funds because they are a custodian of those users' funds. They are not actually doing anything in Web3 in that regard. And I think that is also quite an important learning just in terms of what we're building, you know, focusing more on a non-custodial approach where users are the only ones who have access to their funds and to sign their own transactions. And I think from a Web3 ethos perspective, it's really important because we're trying to tell all of our users that, hey, we're using blockchain because we want you to own everything and you must have ownership of your items. And then if you're giving them a custodial wallet or a custodial approach, you're saying, hey, we want you to own everything, but go and hold it in something that someone else has access to. Doesn't really make sense. And I think that's why we need to really keep focusing on that non-custodial and decentralized
I think
approach.
it's a lesson in terms of usability and user experience because, I mean, the reason people are on FTX, Binance, and whatnot is mostly not because they love the ethos of it. It's because it's a lot less annoying than
Someone else is meant to look after it for you.
With the decentralized tools, right? And so I mean there's the usability experience of waiting for the metaverse to load, but there's also just dealing with tokens and wallets and all this. And until that's greatly streamlined, people are going to gravitate toward centralized services where you just click a couple times and things happen.
Yeah, and fully do agree. But things are getting better. We'll show you
much better.
We'll show you some things after this. But yeah, I think
it's getting better year on year in a really palpable, measurable way, and it's quite clear that with a few more years of improvement, the decentralized tools are going to be really, really easy to use, right? But that, on the other hand, various scammers are screwing people out of their money on an even faster time scale than that.
So requiring exchanges to have minimum capital or reserves, for example, would be one mean, the simple means that would help address an FTX sort of scenario from occurring.
Fantastic. Do we have any time for questions? Maybe just the
negative time.
Well, it's up to Ben because he's going to be
a good point.
Oh, yes.
So I'd be welcome to take a couple of questions, but that's going to encroach on your time, sir. So I'm going to ask Ben, do you think we should have questions?
Well, what can I say? Sure, let's have questions.
Okay, we'll do one question. How's that? But I'm going to challenge you to all answer it in under 30 seconds.
Where's our robot? I'm supposed to have a robot with my talk. Where's the robot?
I could be a robot.
Did she flee in disgust? Yeah?
We can do a Peter Crouch for you. That's probably lost on you, but don't worry, folks. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, a question.
Let's never do that
Let's
again.
have a question. Oh, look at that, folks. You've stunned them to silence. The regulation, the FTX thing, you've traumatized the audience. And I mean, let's face it, regulation's getting better, but the lack of regulation allowed the Biden campaign to get £50 million that nobody's, or $50 million that no one's going to see again. So it's ironic, isn't it, that they're going after the regulation in crypto, the SEC taking Ripple to court. Anyway, I'll get off my bandwagon, folks, and let the experts speak. Any other questions? There's one at the back here. Did I say? No, it's somebody scratching their head. It was almost a question. It was a half question in a sort of dismissive sort of way. Well, I guess you've stunned them to silence, folks. Thank you for the insight on the regulation, which is a very topical debate, and I'm sure we could probably spend the whole day going through stuff like that. But please, nice warm round of applause for the audience.